Isn't this lovely? Anytime we can do one of these midday uh, post shows, whether it is the WWE PLEs or these international pay-per-views that AEW likes to do, I feel as if it's always a good time when we can do these post shows when the sun is out. Guys, this is your 2025 Forbidden Door AEW post show. I am Kevin Zwicker from the Fast Count. Guys, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe. Going into this show, there was a lot surrounding and a lot of talk going into it, talking about the status of Will Ospreay's neck. As you guys may not know, or if you do know, it is pretty much a fait accompli that Will Ospreay will be having neck surgery after this event, and he will be gone for an extended amount of time, which is unfortunate because when you think of AEW, especially since he's arrived, Will Ospreay's face and his name is always something that is associated closely with the company these days. And for him to be gone for an extended amount of time is a big blow for the company. And it looks as if Swerve is going to be gone for a little bit of time as well. Not as much time as Will Ospreay, but he will be missing some time. And that really what it does is it opens up opportunities for Tony Khan to be creative when it comes to who he's going to choose to push now. Whether this is an opportunity for the women that are surrounding the division outside of Mercedes and Tony Storm to get more airtime on the shows. This is a unique opportunity that is, may possibly be a blessing in disguise for the rest of the roster, which is kind of cold to say, but hey, it's the way of the wrestling business. This isn't ballet, right? But this was a show that, the AEW Championship was on the line between MJF and Hangman Adam Page. We had the lights out steel cage match, which as soon as we heard that we were going to get the stipulation of the lights out that is going to be involved with the steel cage match, you knew that there was going to be a lot of blood and violence. You knew that there was going to be a lot of insane spots. You knew that there was going to be something that was going to happen that was going to get people talking after the show is over. And that's exactly what we got, especially with that spot with the Fork and Darby Allin. That was one of those head-turning moments, right? I feel as if anytime, we get an AEW review, there's always one moment throughout the show that I just personally, for me, I have to go, ooh, that's a bit too violent for me. But this was a very solid show for the most part. I know that these AEW pay-per-views, they tend to go long, but for somebody who has to pay $50 for these shows, I'd rather get a lot more than a lot less. I'd rather me look at you and say, hey, give me a little bit less, than say, I want more. But that's just my personal opinion, right? We kicked off the show with the reunion of Adam Copeland and Christian Cage. This was the first time we've seen these guys team up together in 14 years. Very good stuff. As soon as Cope made the transition from WWE to AEW, it was when, not if, we were going to get this tag team reunion with Christian, right? They kicked off the show against Kip Sabian and Luchasaurus, a.k.a. Kill Switch. Originally, Nick Wayne was supposed to be in this match, but he ended up getting injured, so we got the return of Kill Switch on Wednesday Night Dynamite. And you got bits and pieces of vintage, Edge and Christian. What I like about the dynamic that they have right now is just because they have reunited, whether it is going to be a long-term thing or a short-term thing, they haven't switched up the character of Christian Cage at all. A lot of times when we get these reunions of these different teams or we get these alliances, a lot of times they tend to switch both guys to either be faces or baby faces. I like the dynamic that we have right now of Cope being the baby face and Christian being the heel. We don't really see that often. The only time that I could really remember seeing something like that was in WCW with Lex Luger and Sting. Now, I'm sure that there's other examples that you could pull out of your ass, but that is the main example that pops into my mind right now. And throughout this whole match, it looked as if Cope was getting the majority of the in-ring work. Christian was on the apron for the most part, especially when it became, abundantly clear that he wanted nothing to do with Luchasaurus. If you guys remember, he was treated like this lackey by Christian Cage. for the most part before he suffered his long-term injury or was dealing with the battle of the illness that he was suffering for so long. So it was good to see the guy back in the ring, and apparently he has been cleared for several months. It just feels as if they were finding a way of when would be the right opportunity to work him back into storyline. And this was, right man at the right time. And throughout this whole match, you saw the dynamic between Killswitch and Kip, where Killswitch and Kip, it was kind of as if Kip was just this warm body. He was just this guy who was around for Killswitch to technically be involved in this tag team match. You do need two guys, right? And you saw spots where Kip was busted open. Not sure quite where that happened. It just felt as if, he kind of just came up and he was colored up. But throughout this whole match, we saw Killswitch attempt to get his hands on Christian Cage, and Christian, being the weaselly heel that he is, was able to avoid that for the most part. But at the end, we got to see, Christian be saved by Cope. We saw a Killswitch turned into a spear, and they were able to pick up the victory. And you saw this moment at the end where, Christian stuck out his hand, extended it out for Cope to shake it. Cope shaked it. Cope tried to go for the hug, but Christian still wasn't ready. And that feels like that's going to be the story that we're going to see throughout the next couple of months with these guys, or maybe until All In, until we see. For some reason, man, I can't really see the comments. I don't know what's going on, which is unfortunate. I kind of read it on the screen. It looks a little bit too big. Oh, yeah, the angry. What the hell's going on? Why can't I see the comments? Interesting. It looks as if there they go. I still enjoy Captain Charisma, still healing it up. Yep, that's what he did. He is still healing it up, and it feels as if, going into All Out, where we're going to see the showdown between WWE and AEW once again. This time, it is going to be WWE bringing out the big guns, introducing the first time them having a main roster PLE going up against a AEW pay-per-view. I think that's going to be a spot where we're going to see Christian and Cope potentially go for the tag team titles. Maybe not, right? Because of what we saw later on in the tag team championship match. I kind of figured that was going to be the possible direction we're going, All Out, them competing for the tag titles, but who knows, right? Who knows? Still a little bit early to tell. Next, we get into Kyle Fletcher versus Takahashi. Kyle Fletcher, a guy who is on a bit of a big-time heater. He was able to we don't know, this is the claims that he's having. He was able to retire Adam Cole and Dustin Rhodes, two guys who are going to be out for an extended period of time, unfortunately for those guys. But throughout this whole match, and Kyle's one of those guys who, with the absence of Ospreay and Swerve, could potentially be one of the guys that could be the centerpiece around this new potential opportunities that have been brought by those guys' absences. He's a guy who could potentially be on the rise, especially due to the fact that he's already the TNT champion, and this leads a big opportunity for guys to step into the positions that Swerve and Will Ospreay have, right? But throughout this whole match, Kyle Fletcher, he was throwing everything that he possibly could at Takahashi, and Takahashi was just eating it. He was laughing it off. It felt as if Kyle was just unloading the clip, and no matter what he was able to do, Takahashi was able to withstand it, right? But at the end of the day, Kyle was able to hit a brain buster for the win. You kind of knew, especially with Kyle being positioned in the position that he's in right now, that there was no way he was going to lose the TNT championship that quickly. And that's exactly what took place. Kyle retained the championship. Kyle is a guy who's right there, not at the tip of the top when it comes to the main event scene in AEW, but you could tell that sooner rather than later, he's going to be a guy who is going to have his name thrown into that conversation of the AEW main event scene. Those glasses, you're not a big fan of the glasses. He's a heel. You're not supposed to like the shit that he does, right? Next, we're going to get into the four-way, this interpromotional four-way for the TBS Championship. We have the TBS champion, Mercedes Moné. We have Alex Windsor, a.k.a. Miss Ospreay. We have Persephone, who is representing CMLL. And we have Bozilla, who is representing Stardom. Now, Bozilla was the star of this match. If you guys aren't familiar with the work that she's been able to put in Stardom, I recommend that you check it out. She's obviously somebody who is extremely large. And throughout this whole match, you had different opportunities that all these ladies were trying to do their best to take out Bozilla, but it feels as if, basically she was just this unstoppable monster throughout this whole time. And I think this was a really good opportunity for Persephone and Bozilla, two people who usually don't get the opportunity to wrestle in front of this audience. This was a good introductory to these ladies, especially for Bozilla, somebody who's 21 years old. She looked like $1 million out there. You saw a whole bunch of people throughout the match just tweeting out that infamous picture of Stephanie Vicure celebrating in that after party after Forbidden Door last year, where as soon as she had that match with Mercedes, she was snatched up by WWE with the quickness. And everybody is saying that now Bozilla is going to be put in the exact same position, which, hey, if that's what happens with her, she's able to parlay this into a big payday, whether it's from AEW or WWE, good for her, right? You want to see young talent be able to be put on the biggest stage that they possibly can be able to be put on and be able to make a good living for themselves. But she was great in this match. Yes, she is a star. I 100% agree with that. I think that she made her mark on this UK crowd that was pretty much hot for everything. You saw Mercedes Moné pick up the W in the most heelish way that she possibly can. Persephone, she goes for a razor's edge on Mercedes, but Mercedes is able to counteract that into a roll-up 1, 2, 3. She is still our TBS champion. She is still the greatest female wrestler to ever lace up the boots. And if you don't agree with me, well, your opinion is wrong. Next, we get into Nigel McGuinness versus Zack Sabre Jr. for the New Japan World Heavyweight Championship. You knew that this was going to be a technical battle between these two guys. Zack Sabre Jr., who is the best technical wrestler on the planet right now, going up against a guy that he has faced in the past, but it's been multiple years since we've been able to see Nigel McGuinness versus Zack Sabre Jr. And at that time, Zack Sabre Jr. was still a guy who was wet behind the ears. And this was two Brits wrestling in front of the UK crowd. You knew that these two guys were going to get as much love as possible. You saw Nigel McGuinness, of course, come out to Oasis, who is crowned the greatest rock band of all time by Excalibur, which didn't get much love from my father, who says that the Beatles are the best band of all time, which I also disagree with as well. But hey, some folks like, pizza, other folks like, steak, right? And some folks don't like either of them, right? But this was a good technical matchup between these two guys. It felt as if every single move that was put on, between these two guys, you could tell and you could see that shit looked like it hurt. Daniel Garcia, he accompanied Nigel McGuinness to the ring for this match after Nigel McGuinness was able to gain the opportunity to get into this match. Daniel Garcia came with a towel around his waist, in his arms, and it looked as if with that happening, it kind of felt as if you were going to see Daniel Garcia throw the towel in when when Zack Sabre Jr. was able to put Nigel McGuinness in a hole that he wasn't able to get out of. But we didn't see that happen. We did not see that occur. That's not what went down. We saw Zack Sabre Jr. beat Nigel McGuinness straight up with a roll-up. After that match, you saw the females brawling. You saw Queen Aminata and Tekla brawling, which if you guys have been keeping up with Collision, you've known that those ladies have been putting on a clinic on those Saturday night shows. Every single week you see them brawling, whether it's in the ring, the backstage, it doesn't matter. These women have been going at it for several weeks, and I've enjoyed the majority of it. They had a match that they were both involved with in the pre-show, the 0 Hour, and this was a continuation of that. We saw Tekla get some help from Sky Blue and Julia, and it looked as if all hope was lost for the Queen. But we got returning Jamie Hayter. Jamie Hayter, who got love from the UK crowd. She was able to help even up the odds, and this is a big boost for the women's division who needs it. I've said on multiple different occasions that there are a lot of talented women on the AEW women's roster, but for the most part, the TV time solely goes, especially on Dynamite, solely really goes to Toni Storm and Mercedes Moné, and storylines that pretty much revolve around those two. And it's something that all wrestling needs to work out for the most part, where it's like you have these women on the roster, but not a lot of times we see them feuding that in a program that doesn't involve the title. And I think that that's something that with this addition of Jamie Hayter and with the storyline and the brawls that we've seen between Tekla and Queen Eminata, is something that we can start to kickstart and see more often. Next, we get into the triple threat for the AEW Tag Team Champions. You have FTR, you have the Hurt Syndicate, who is very over tonight. A lot of We Hurt People crowd, and Brodito, who has been one of the hottest talents that have been put together recently. A lot of times, with these freaking tag teams, it doesn't really work off the rip, but it kind of feels like seamlessly that these two guys have been able to, be on the same page, put on quality matches, and been able to get over with the crowd. Now, you saw the Hurt Syndicate come out without MVP. I don't want to speculate as to why. I'm not going to state this as facts, but I think it has something to do with his a previous conviction that he's had several years in the past where he can't travel to certain international shows. Maybe that's just me assuming. That could be 100% wrong, and if it is, I would apologize to the guy if he sees it. But he wasn't there, right? And this match was good. FTR, this tandem that they've had with Stokely, I felt like has worked very, very well. I think that they are two guys who have shown in the past that they have the ability to talk, but adding Stokely adds a new dimension to their game. The Hurt Syndicate, they are these two guys who've been big. And going into this match, you hear all these different rumors, from the dirt sheets about these guys not wanting to take pins, or these guys being willing to take a pin, but it has to be to certain teams and not certain other teams. You get all these different stories, and it kind of warps your mind into thinking as to how some of their matches are going to be predictable, right? And I felt as if going into this, with them making it a triple threat, that'd be the easy out for them to lose the championship without getting pinned. And that's exactly what we got, right? Hurt Syndicate was wrecking shop for the most part. The other teams were able to get their shine on. FTR, Brodito. We got different shots in this match where we saw Brody King and Bobby Lashley confronting each other, being in the middle of this ring. And that's something that I think people want to see down the line. But at one point in the match, we got these masked men attacking the Hurt Syndicate. They are in shiesties and New Japan tracksuits, so we don't see who they are. And we get the reveal. It is GOA and Ricochet. Now, there's multiple different angles that they can go with this, right? And you saw Bryan Danielson speak about it, who was on commentary for this whole show. He said this could possibly be, if you guys remember, MVP told MJF that if he wins the AEW World Championship, that Bobby Lashley would be going after them. And if you saw on Wednesday, you saw Ricochet was basically a paid lackey by MJF. You could also date back all the way back to when the Hurt Syndicate first arrived, and they gave Ricochet a business card, and Ricochet had it ripped up because he wasn't able to know when to shut up. So there's multiple different stories that we could go with this. I just think the fact that they didn't take the pin was funny because it basically confirms a lot of what the dirt sheets were writing. We saw Brodito pick up the win, but this win was kind of weird. I think they really botched the finish, right? Because you had Brody King flip Bandito on top of Dax, and it looked as if Dax didn't kick out. And Brodito and Bandito got off of him. And then he just did it over again and pinned him. And Cash Wheeler looked as if he was attempting to stop it, but was like 30 seconds too late. They completely botched this finish. It looks as if there was a lot of miscommunication between the tag teams, but Bro Dito are your new tag team champions. Bandito, 2 belts. He is the Ring of Honor World Champion, and he is the AEW Tag Team Champion with Brody King. And I think everybody is good with that result. The Hurt Syndicate are very over, but they don't necessarily need the world titles. And they have become such a dominant force that there really isn't a team, coming up the pipeline, that, youth-wise, that would legitimately look as if they could beat the Hurt Syndicate. But hey, that's done and over with now. They have something else they need to worry about, and now we have new tag team champions. I did not want to see another Arnold Skolin tossing the towel on Bob Backlund. And the day, Jamie is a great talent. Yes, she is a very talented individual. Next, we get into Swerve Strickland versus Okada. 2 of the more marquee names in AEW for the unified, I was going to say undisputed, the unified championship. Something that I don't understand is if that championship that Okada has around his waist is the unified title, why is he carrying 3 belts? I thought the whole time, the whole reason to unify a championship was just for it to have 1 belt so you wouldn't have to carry all the other ones. But I guess it's me just thinking too logically, right? I guess the presentation of walking around with 3 looks better. But Okada and Swerve, we saw this match previously at Dynamite 250, and I enjoyed it then. I enjoyed this a little bit more than this one because going into this show, we got the report that Swerve Strickland is going to be missing time. He has been wrestling on a torn meniscus since 2019. And throughout this whole match, you saw Okada working on that knee. Anytime Swerve was able to pick up some offense, we saw him selling the knee. Okada was attacking the knee throughout this whole match. And with Okada newly winning the title at All In, that was just in July, and Swerve Strickland being in the position that he's in right now where he's going to be taking time off, you kind of knew that Okada was going to win. And with the stipulation of, nobody being able to be, at ringside for these unification matches, you kind of figured that there was going to be some way somehow that Okada was going to win clean. And he was able to do that. Swerve Strickland went for a house call, but Okada was able to counter it with a Rainmaker. 1, 2, 3. Okada retains the unified championship. But that was not the end of this. Swerve Strickland, he had his leg caught in between the stairs, and Okada slapped his meniscus or his leg that the torn meniscus is on multiple different times. You had Prince Nana come out with a pipe in hand to try to back these guys off, but as soon as that went down, we got a return of a face that we haven't seen in such a long time. We got the return of Wardlow, who is fresh off of filming and recording a role on the American Gladiator reboot, which is a show that I feel like gets rebooted every 10 years. And he was taking out Prince Nana right in front of Swerve Strickland, who wasn't able to do anything because he was too busy getting his knee freaking destroyed, right? So you saw the horror on Swerve Strickland's face because he was defenseless and couldn't do anything for Nana. We get Wardlow joining the ever-growing Don Callis family. And this sets up a instant program with Swerve Strickland as soon as he is able to come back, which, hey, I guess Tony was waiting on the potential idea that he thought was appropriate for the return of Wardlow. I know that he was gone for an extended amount of time before even filming American Gladiator. So I guess it was just about right time and right storyline. And I guess this is the time that Tony has deemed to be appropriate for Wardlow to make his long-awaited return. Next, we get Athena versus Toni Storm. Athena, who is the top dog in Ring of Honor in the women's division, against Toni Storm, who is the top dog in the AEW women's division. We finally see these two clash at Forbidden Door. Toni comes out dressed in George Washington-esque attire. She has the pale-faced makeup, and she comes with the Revolutionary War time wig. These two ladies were able to go out there, perform at a pretty high level. Billy Starks was taken out by a pile driver almost immediately to just get her out of the way. And for the most part, we got to see these two ladies go at it, right? But they got to a point where Billy Starks was able to wake up out of it. She was messing with the ring apron, kind of getting Toni Storm off of her footing. At that point, the referee was distracted by Athena, and it looked as if Billy Starks was going to hit Toni Storm with a chair, but she was saved by Mina Shirakawa. Anytime we see Mina is a good time to me. But it went really back and forth. Toni was able to pick up the W by locking Athena in a chicken wing choke. Shout out to Bob Backlund, and Athena tapped. This wasn't any other occasion where we saw, maybe she was in a hold and she passed out. Nope. We saw Athena tap out to Toni Storm. So there was a definitive winner in this match, and there was a definitive ending between these two. I don't know what is next for Toni Storm. Are we going to see a rematch with Athena? I think it's pretty much done for Athena because she used her contract and she ended up losing. But hey, we could run it back, or we could see a new opponent step up for Toni. We could run it back with Megan Bayne. We could run it, with Jamie Hayter. We could run it back with Mercedes. There's a couple of different, candidates where we could see Toni Storm go at it next. Next, we get into the AEW World Championship match. This is Swerve's house. Great match. Glad Swerve's getting time off. They're messing up Wardlow. Man, Wardlow to me is a less talented Batista. And Batista was never, a guy who's giving you 5-star matches on a weekly basis. But that's to me what Wardlow is, a less talented Batista. But if you guys don't remember, the stipulations for this world title match, that was established on Wednesday after MJF and his hired goons threatened to set Mark Briscoe on fire was if there was a disqualification, the title would change hands. If there was a countout, the title would change hands. And MJF doesn't have to put his contract on the line. And this is a really good match. For a match where getting DQ'd could lose you the title, this was pretty violent. And both of these guys were busted open. I was kind of confused because we saw spots where there was a table brought out, and I kind of always thought if tables were involved, that would initiate a DQ. But I guess I was totally wrong and have been watching wrestling the wrong way for my whole life. But MJF, he came in this match, and it felt as if he was going to do every single thing that he possibly could do to win this AEW title. And he did that. Every single trick you could see in the book, he tried to have Hangman Page use the dynamite ring on him, right? He spit in Hangman's face. It looked as if Hangman was going to use the dynamite ring on him, but he knew better and just spit right back in MJF's face, which was pretty freaking gross. MJF hit multiple different low blows on Hangman Page when the referee was not looking. He had a heat seeker on Hangman. We got a 1-2-3, but Hangman's foot was on the rope. This is very similar to what we saw a couple weeks back where MJF was able to beat Mark Briscoe that way. But we didn't hear the bell ring because the referee was down for the most part. And then we see Mark Briscoe come out. He is flanked by security. They're able to get to him before he is able to get to the ring. And once MJF is going back to give Hangman Page some more punishment, the referee is out of it. He comes back into it, and he sees MJF trying to remove Hangman Page's foot from the rope, but Bryce checks it out and sees it. He does whatever he can to Hangman Page after that, hits him with multiple different low blows, hits him with the contract to the head. Hangman just will not go down. We see the ref turn his back to these guys again. We see Hangman hit MJF with the contract. He hits him with a buckshot 1, 2, 3. Hangman Page retains the AEW Championship. Poor MJF, but at least he still has the contract in his back pocket. So not all is lost for the former AEW World Champion. Tables are the same as side headlocks, apparently, right? So we get into the main event, the lights out steel cage match, right? We got the Death Riders plus Gabe Kidd and the Bucks going up against this, multi-star team that Will Ospreay was able to assemble. We got Ospreay, we got the Golden Lovers, we got Darby Allin, and we got Tanahashi. And this was balls to the wall action. You knew that there was going to be a lot of freaking violence. That's exactly what we got. We got a lot of blood. We got a lot of gore. We got a lot of spots to where you're just going like, oh my God, like, how is this guy able to take this amount of punishment? We got the Bucks coming out to this match, right? And they didn't get their normal music. They got Bop by Hanson as their theme song to come out to the ring. And there was a spot in the match where it looks as if the Young Bucks were going to take out the thumbtacks. They had this sack in their hand, and they open up the sack, and they start putting stuff on the ground. And look, there were like a lot of colorful pieces. So originally, I thought they were Legos, which if you ever stepped on a Lego, you know that those things freaking hurt. But they were not Legos. They were gummy bears, which I love gummy bears, and I'm sure that you love gummy bears as well. But throughout this whole match, it felt as if this was going to be Will Ospreay's swan song. He was going to go balls to the wall. He was going to, do things that we usually see out of Will Ospreay, but onto another level, with him going to be gone for so long, right? But for the most part, Darby Allin was the guy who took a lot of punishment throughout this match. He was taped, to a chair, and we saw Claudio and Jon Moxley surround him like a pack of wild dogs. Jon Moxley takes out a fork. And if you guys remember All In, Jon Moxley was stabbed multiple times in the head with a fork, but Darby Allin was not stabbed in the head with a fork. He was basically getting his ear ripped apart by Jon Moxley with that fork, which was utterly disgusting. Something that I didn't need to see. But hey, this is a lights out match. So with these lights out match, you're going to see some wild shit. That's exactly what we saw. Wheeler Yuta wasn't in the match, but he was outside of the cage. Same thing with Marina. It was a spot where we saw Darby Allin on top of the cage fighting off Wheeler Yuta, and Wheeler Yuta was on trying to come inside of the match, but he wasn't able to, and Darby Allin was able to get it to where Wheeler Yuta fell through the announce table, which was some gnarly shit as well. But the spot that outside of that thing with Darby getting his ear ripped apart, that was kind of crazy, was you saw Darby and Gabe Kidd, who is one half of what, in my opinion, is the match of the year. Russell Dynasty, Gabe Kidd, Kenny Omega in the Tokyo Dome. Check it out if you haven't. It's a phenomenal match. But you see these two guys, they had tables kind of stacked on top of each other at the outside of the cage. And both of those guys went through it, right? At the end, we saw Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega, two guys who've had classic matches against each other. They were able to hit the Hidden Blade and the One-Winged Angel on one of the Bucks. They let Tanahashi, who was in his farewell tour, hit a frog splash to pick up the win. The good guys go home with the victory. And while the pay-per-view looked as if it was going off, we see Will Ospreay, in the middle of the ring, looking as if he is, giving his last goodbyes to the crowd, because we're not going to see him for a long time. And we see the Death Riders attack him from behind the cage. They figure a way to lock the baby faces out of the cage. So Will Ospreay's in there alone. The Death Riders are just, brutalizing this guy, and they put a chair around his neck. They step on it. You see the ops coming out to try to make the assist, but the cage won't come up, which I have no idea as to why they can't just climb the cage, because we saw Marina climb the cage. So why is she able to climb it, but nobody else is? I have no idea. I guess I'm asking too many questions and thinking too logically, But Will Ospreay basically has a built-in feud as soon as he comes back, which we don't know when it's going to be. We just know it's going to be a long time. When it comes to necks, you don't want to play around with those things. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a year plus before we see Will Ospreay. But as soon as he comes back, we know that we're going to see Will going at it with Jon Moxley, which is a one-on-one match that I don't think that we have seen since Will has arrived in AEW. And for the most part, it's a contrasting of the styles, but I'm always interested when it comes to seeing two different individuals have two different styles and the way we're going to be able to see it mixed. A matchup, like if I had any type of fantasy matchup in my mind, it would be Randy Savage versus CM Punk. Because if you guys know, Randy Savage is a guy who's very meticulous about, going step by step. Every single thing that he was doing in the ring was very meticulous, was very structured. It was very, by the letter. And CM Punk, who is, famous for being kind of like a freestyler in there and just going off of the hip. So that's a matchup that I've always wanted to see fantasy-wise in my mind. And Jon Moxley and Will Ospreay, two contrasting styles, and I'm interested to see it when and if we see the return of Will Ospreay. But if you want to give this show a Dave Meltzer star rating, I'm going to go with a solid 4. Sometimes with these shows, the only thing that ever brings them down is the length. But like I've said before, I'd rather get too much wrestling than not enough for $50. If this was a similar situation that WWE has with Peacock, where it's just $10 a month, I would be fine with us just getting 5 to 6 matches because it is what it is. But with us paying $50, give me more, and I'd rather them be these marathon shows than me feeling as if I didn't get my money's worth. But guys, before I get out of here, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe. We are, I think, a little bit over 40 subs away from hitting 3,000. So if you were able to hit that mark relatively soon, it'd be much appreciated on my end. Guys, it has been a long day, and I have other things that I need to record before the day is over. So be sure to check into the Raw post show, which goes on every single week. Same thing on Wednesday with the Dynamite post shows. It is immediately following those shows. So it's an every week thing. And we'll be back next weekend as well with the Clash in Paris WWE PLE post show. But guys, hit the like button, hit the sub button if you haven't. I am Kevin Zwicker. I'm out.